Welcome to the 2020 RACGP Presidential Q&A. I'm Dr. Gillian Singleton, co-host of the RACGP's Generally Speaking podcast. Your moderator tonight is two-time Walkley Award-winner Virginia Trioli. Virginia is one of Australia's best-known journalists with a formidable reputation as a television anchor, radio presenter, writer and commentator. For 8 years, she hosted the Drive program on ABC Radio Melbourne and the morning program on ABC Radio Sydney. She's been the host of Lateline, Artscape and Sunday Arts and is an occasional host on Q&A. Last year, she swapped the very early starts as co-host of ABC News Breakfast for return to radio. You can now hear Virginia host ABC Radio Melbourne's morning program. Our 6 presidential candidates are in extremely experienced hands this evening. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Virginia.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Royal Australian College of GPs Presidential Q&A. I'm Virginia Trioli, and I'm your host and your moderator for this evening's event. And welcome to everyone, wherever you're tuning in around the country. And if you're replaying this, because we're recording this evening, this Monday night, then great that you could have a look at this too. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from where each of us is joining this meeting this evening. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm going to introduce to you your candidates for the 2020 presidential election in just a moment, and we'll have a terrific discussion as well, deriving from questions that you've suggested yourselves as members. But before I do that, I think it'd be nice for us all to take a moment to acknowledge the immediate past president of the college, the late Dr. Harry Nespolon. It was my delight to interview Harry from time to time in my role on ABC TV and radio too. Harry was, as you all know, a passionate advocate for GPs and for Australian general practice, and a prominent figure in the media, turned up on my show and many other places besides, particularly throughout the last 8 months. I last spoke to Harry in May when he appeared on ABC Radio Melbourne to urge the community to visit their GP to receive their flu vaccination, which turned out to be the least of our problems, didn't it? Yeah. Harry refused to let his illness slow his efforts to raise awareness of the vital role that GPs play in the community. I'm told he continued to speak to media, meet with Australia's political leaders and advocate for his peers, doing all of this from his hospital bed. And it seemed that Harry has left the college's next president enormous shoes to fill, and you could do worse than take your lead from the way that Harry ran things. So this brings us to our presidential candidates and this evening's event. 6 candidates, 6 of your fellow members have put themselves forward. So tonight's Q&A is an opportunity for all 6 candidates to share their vision for the college. It'll be recorded and then made available on the website for those who can't join us live, or if you want to go back and take a look at it again later on before you vote. By the end of the evening, you should know what your candidates stand for on a range of key topics, how they'll support and advocate for you, and how they'll perform under the pressure when interviewed on the media by someone like me. Although I don't intend to go nearly as hard as I would. Each of your candidates will have the opportunity to respond to 3 questions, one of which you may have submitted. And they'll have up to 2 minutes each to provide their response. And then once everyone has had a chance to respond to that particular question in that block, then we'll have a general discussion amongst us, and then we'll move on to the next question. After question time, I'll facilitate a 15-minute general discussion with the candidates where they'll have the chance to share a final message or a statement with you. So before I introduce your candidates, just to remind you, voting for your president opens at midday on Thursday, the 20th of August. That's this Thursday. And it closes at 12 noon on Monday, the 31st of August. So for those who might be curious, the order in which the candidates are presented tonight is actually based on the ballot draw, which was undertaken by the returning officer for the 2020 college elections. Mr. Richard Kidd did that, and that list was shared with all candidates. So let me introduce them to you, and I might ask you, dear candidates, to do a little wave so that for those who don't know, so they know who you are as I call your name, if that's okay. So yeah, thanks, Magdalena. We'll get to you. Dr. Karen Price, if you can introduce yourself. Dr. Karen Price is a Melbourne GP and Deputy Chair of the College Victoria Council. Dr. Christopher Irwin is a Melbourne GP and Director of The Local Doctor. Dr. Charlotte Hespe is a GP and a practice owner in Sydney and the current chair of the College New South Wales and ACT. Dr. Ayman Shenouda is a GP from Wagga and a chair of the College Rural, RACGP Rural. Dr. John Buckley is a Brisbane GP, there he is, and Director of Medical Education for General Practice Training, Queensland. And last but not least, Dr. Magdalena Simonis is a Melbourne GP and board member for Women's Health Victoria and the National Hearing Advisory Panel. And you can find out more about each of our candidates on our website. A link to the site will be displayed at the end of the Q&A, but of course you should know that link anyway. All right, so I'm going to ask the questions in the order of the candidates as I introduce them to you, and also the order there on the ballot. So let's start with our first question. Dr. Karen Price, we'll start with you. Given ongoing financial constraints in general practice, how would you advocate on behalf of GPs to obtain better access to Medicare funding for their patients and to help ensure the sustainability of general practice? Dr. Price.
This is the most critical question of all, and I do have an advocacy plan which I've detailed. And what I've noticed is that this is not going to be a moral argument. We know the research is established for general practice and primary care systems. And if it was going to be moral, it would have happened by now. It's not even perhaps going to be financial, although COVID and the bushfires have pushed us into a place where maybe that's a bit more of a lever. We know we could discuss that there's $3 billion worth of avoidable hospital admissions. We know we could discuss there's $1.5 billion worth of low acuity ED presentations we can avoid. And I've written for Croaky last year on how Denmark has, by reinvesting in primary care, has actually closed some tertiary hospitals. If that was a lever, though, it would have happened by now. And what we have to think about is this is a political space. And what does the government fear even more than money? They fear not being elected. And that's where we've got to act. This is how the pathologists moved the lever in their efforts at the last election. So in this case, I'm going to engage the patient voice, and I'm going to put them on my National Council for Primary Care Doctors, and that will help us advocate up into Canberra. The other part of this is down into every electorate in which all doctors, all GPs from around Australia are participating. This is not a party political campaign. This is about advocating for patients' access to their own healthcare dollars. And that's a really important conversation that we need to have with them as from the RACGP. And I believe the RACGP could help patients advocate by printing resources and so forth for them. So I'm going to have KP as a people-powered political pressure president. When I go to Canberra, which will be often, I hope, I will be in the health minister's ear all the time, so that when he wakes up and when he goes to sleep at night, he is going to think of healthcare and he's going to think of general practice first, because that's what we need to do. He needs to be afraid of the fact that GPs can unite, and he needs to be afraid of the fact that we can also organise our electorate to ask for the proper funding of primary care. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Christopher Irwin, we'll turn to you now.
Hello, thanks for listening. And I think what Karen is suggesting sounds very much a professional and effective advocacy and lobby group, which I support. So I feel we need to form a professional and effective GP lobby group. We need to effectively lobby politicians and the public. The ECG, the telehealth debacles, the decade-long Medicare freeze show us that politicians simply do not listen to well-thought-out messages by well-meaning GPs. The Pathology Guild and the Pharmacy Guild have shown us how incredibly effective lobbying is. This is distorting primary care in a way that increases costs to taxpayers and patients, fragments care, and in my opinion, leads to poorer health outcomes. We know that every dollar spent in general practice saves $13 in hospitals. Imagine the force for good that a professional GP lobby group could be. The total turnover of the Pharmacy Guild is only around $10 million. In our last financial report, we had a surplus of over $10 million, and we already spend as much as $20 million on advocacy, in addition to $4 million in advertising. I just think we can use that money more effectively. As a successful business owner, I understand the numbers. I believe through cross-utilization of services with the RACGP, we could create a lobby group even more efficient than the Pharmacy Guild. Give me a third of what the RACGP is already spending on advocacy, $7 or $8 million. And not only can I create a lobby group that puts patients and the GPs who care for them first, we can potentially save the RACGP money at the same time.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. Charlotte Hespe, we'd like to hear from you. Thanks.
Thanks. This is, as Karen said, a really key issue for us. The sustainability of general practice is actually just on a precipice. We're on a really fine-edged cliff at the moment, because general practice has been systematically starved of financial support from our government over the last 20 years. Quite honestly, I don't understand why, and I've watched it from the sidelines, watching it as all the sexy stories get money, and yet general practice, which is the most cost-effective part of our health system and is really the only affordable part of the system that we can actually make an argument for to continue to put more money into, is it misses out. So why does it miss out? It misses out because we actually don't go and sell the story. A bit like what Karen said, I actually think we need to be constantly loud, noisy, jumping up and down, become that dripping tap about what it is. But really importantly, we need the story. We need the story about why. It's not just saying funders, and the story is about improved patient health outcomes. So with that, not only do we need to make Greg Hunt love us because he can see we're actually going to save him money, we actually need to bring our GPs, that's you, and the community with us. And that's what the Guild does so effectively. They talk about a pharmacy in every single town and village and space. We have those GPs. Go out there. Go and talk to all your patients. They're really strong lobbyists. Go and talk to your MP. Go and talk to your senator. The RACGP can actually give you those resources, and together, united, that voice, that's the voice we need. We don't need to call anybody else in. We've got 41,000 members. We are the strength. We are the voice. Let's go and get them.
Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks so much. We'll hear now from Dr. Ayman Shenouda.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I think our country is in crisis at the moment, and the profession that's going to win is going to put solutions for this crisis. We've got mental health problems. We've got people with chronic disease that haven't been managed well in the time of crisis and in the pandemic because of access to general practice. We've got well-being. We need to increase the productivity of people in the coming years. There is an immunization that's going to be run through general practice that we're going to immune people and look after them. There is aged care problem that's happening now, and the governments are looking for solutions. I think we need to position ourselves to offer solutions. We need to be confident in ourselves that we can deliver on target. You can see telehealth. It was approved in 24 hours after we've been lobbying for years on having telehealth access. Approved in 24 hours because it added value in time of crisis. I think there's a great opportunity for us to do that. There's also some money around in the system, and we are the most efficient part of the system. There's a lot of waste in the system that we can actually show some saving that can be reinvested in general practice. Primary health networks, why can they invest in general practice? Why can they commission general practice to do projects? So the other thing that I can offer personally in terms of advocacy is I've established relationship with politicians. I established relationship with bureaucrats. That's who run the show too. So I can continue the advocacy that we started over the years. And I've got the skills and the knowledge and the understanding of the environment to do that. Thank you.
Ayman Shenouda, thanks so much. Dr. John Buckley, we'll turn to you next.
Thanks, Virginia. I'll also start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands of where everyone is tonight, the elders past, present and emerging, and any Indigenous people watching this now or recording. I want to talk about two things, a little different. I want to talk about opportunity, and I want to talk about a culture shift. Right now, Minister Hunt is developing the 10-year primary healthcare plan, and we need to get in on the ground with that. And it's a great opportunity for us to put general practice in the centre of that plan where it deserves to be. We've got particular leverage at the moment from the COVID crisis and from the bushfire crisis. General practice has a very high standing in the way it's behaved. I think it's a great recruitment tool. I'll get to that later, but it's a wonderful way of showing government and the public what we can do. And general practice is held in very high favour for House performing. And I acknowledge here tonight those members who are in Melbourne, particularly the 3 candidates here who live in Victoria. It's a wonderful place for general practice to showcase who we are and what we do. In the bushfire crisis, we saw where general practice was involved, how well it worked, and where general practice was sidelined, the problems it had. We've already had a report in Victoria of the government ignoring general practice in the first phase of COVID and the consequences of that. We can leverage that, but not only that part of the COVID crisis, but the excellent work done by the late Harry Hespe and others in engaging with government on this crisis, and again, making ground for general practice that we can build on. The culture shift I want, too many people think about Medicare as the fee or the income of the GP. It is a rebate arrangement. It is money transacted between the patient and the government. We need to free ourselves of that and our thinking, and we need to get the minds of the public and government to understand what Medicare really is so we can grow in confidence. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, John. And Magdalena Simonis, we'll hear finally from you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for the question, Virginia. And it seems like we're all on the same page in various ways. I think that the financial constraints in general practice are due to chronically being undervalued and therefore underfunded. And yes, the Medicare rebate is not the be-all and end-all, but it's a representation of the value that's ascribed to what we do. And we are measured by our Medicare item number billings, which is what the government understands and interprets as our contribution to the health system, which is not actually the case. So my recommendation is that we put GPs at the primary care model, because there are a lot of other elements within the primary care sector that are actually competing for that space. When we think of primary care, we think of general practice. When the government thinks of primary care, they think of a horizontal platform with a variety of other performers within that context, and they don't see that there's a distinct difference between us and them in terms of us being the health specialists. We are actually the ones with the training to deliver on the longitudinal health plan, the longitudinal care, and also in delivering the long-term national health strategy, which was set out in 2019. I recommend that we advocate to government that they increase their funding of general practice, because we are going to partner with them in addressing the long-term national health strategy, in managing the pig and the python of chronic disease and ageing that's coming through the system, which is what they foresee. Now, when the government measures our input, they measure our Medicare item number spend. What we do per item number is a multitude of different things, and that's not being measured. And unpacking that and demonstrating that return on investment is not 1 on 1, but it's actually 1 in 5, then that diminishes or relinquishes that whole discussion around other people within the primary care sector competing for that space, and puts us in the centre of it.
Magdalena, thanks so much. We've got a few minutes left over in this block of time to talk, and you've raised a number of points that maybe we can come back to at the end. But one that leaps out at me, and it comes through clearly in everything you're saying about the need to advocate and to get on the front foot and to be right in the face of the government. And a number of you referenced there what the Pathology Guild and the Pharmacy Guilds have, you've argued, successfully done. There's a degree of potentially moral cloudiness about that. And both the pharmacy and pathology guilds have had their problems with that in the public perception, given they are, very much, for-profit organisations and organisations that will benefit from anything they've managed to winkle out of the government. How do you each propose to sidestep the moral cloudiness of becoming fierce advocates and lobbyists in the same way as those organisations have? And we'll go through this randomly if I can. John Buckley.
Thanks, Virginia. I, trying to decide where they get the impact. Do they get it from great lobbying, or do they get it from political donations? It's probably both. And I think about what our members would want. I don't believe our members would want us to spend large amounts of money on political donations. I do believe they would like us to spend money on really effective lobbyists. I'm happy to hear the views of members in time, but that's the position I take at the moment. It's my personal view.
Karen Price.
Well, I think the President provides the lobbying power here as long as we've got a mandate from the voters. And in terms of the moral cloudiness, I'm not talking about paying anybody. I feel a bit uncomfortable about paying all the political parties. I think that is morally and ethically a challenging proposition. And so my National Council of Primary Care Doctors is the UGPA, which already exists, and it doesn't cost any money. So it's not about paying for political favours. It's about engaging the patients in exactly the conversation about their healthcare dollar. And that's about them arguing for quality primary care and access to it. So I don't feel that we've got a particularly moral issue there, except that we're arguing for patients' access to the best healthcare system in the world, led by absolutely top-class GPs of Australia.
Charlotte, I'll come to you. I think you're on mute at the moment, so you might want to unmute yourself to answer that.
Thanks, Virginia. I absolutely agree with you, Virginia. There is no way that we would want to set ourselves up to look like the Guild. The Guild does pay for what they get, and that is not actually anything that...
Can I just jump in? It's not a question that goes to whether you might pay or not. It's actually the perception created in being that forceful lobby group, given that, as a couple of you have acknowledged, that in the minds of some people, Medicare equates with GP's income. But go on.
Thanks. Look, again, I mean, I think it's about the approach that you take and the story that you're selling. I'm not there to just increase income into the GP's pocket. I'm actually there selling the story about what we as GPs offer the Australian population. We've actually got a tsunami wave of chronic disease issues in front of us that we absolutely cannot afford going forwards. And so it is actually about selling our story, because we have been just sitting on the sidelines and letting the hospitals sink that money, including the pathologists and all the diagnostics. And we actually need to now stand up tall, strong, and very proud of what we do, using the community to come with us to actually do that. And that's where I was using the Guild, because their model is about using the pharmacists in the community space to sell what they do.
Chris?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, Virginia. I think, as you sort of accurately said, we've got two separate but intertwined issues here. We have the lobbying by itself, and one thing I'm quite proud of is I feel I've managed to bring this to the agenda, and it seems many candidates now agree with me that we do need to effectively lobby. And the second question is much harder, is the moral question of political donations. When you look at the Pharmacy Guild, for example, they do get bang for buck, let's be honest. They spend somewhere between 500,000 to $1 million a year in political donations to both political parties. To answer the question on both, I think we need to consider the moral thorn that we are wounded by continuing to fail to act as advocates for our patients. The pathologists, the pharmacists are using very legal means that, in my opinion, are increasing patient costs. They're fragmenting care, and, in my opinion, producing poorer health outcomes. And at some point, we have to ask what harm we are doing our patients by failing to act in a legal and responsible manner to advocate effectively for them.
Let's turn to Ayman Shenouda next.
Look, I think, Virginia, people feel like lobbying is a very short journey. It's a very long journey. I remember when I was started on the board of the college, we started dedicating a strategic planning to lobby for our members. The first thing was a market survey, and the market survey asked the patient, do you know what RACGP is? None of the patients or the population know who we are. The politicians don't know who we are. So we started by an ad that was very effective in getting the population to understand that the RACGP is the representative body for GPs and for them. And then we turned that also to politicians, where every politician in the airport will see RACGP and see what RACGP is. Now, after that, our access to politicians have improved significantly in the last couple of years. So in the old days, we couldn't get a decent appointment with the minister. Now, if I talk to the minister, he will call me within half an hour. Not only that, but anything that would be suggested to be planned, the minister would ask, have RACGP approved that or not? Okay. So we reached
I'll wrap you up there, Ayman, just because we're running a little bit short.
I just want to say
quickly.
something. Yes, just the patients. So we've got access to 90% of the population.
Yep.
This is huge lobbying power that we need to use to the advantage of patients and not to the advantage of the GPs only.
Ayman, thank you. Magdalena, I'll come to you finally.
Great. So I think there are a few issues here, and one of them is that the voice of the GP has been fragmented from day dot. We've talked about RACGP lobbying and advocating, but we've actually not put into this equation or discussion AMA, ACRM and the other peak GP bodies. So when the government hears from RACGP, they're thinking, well, okay, so one group, where are the others? We're not a unified force on this, and I think that that is where our strength would be if we, certainly on the very big issues and remuneration and funding to the primary care sector, I think we all need to have one voice and we need to collaborate and take that together. We need to pick up on those discussions that have been had already with the peak, with the policymakers and government, and we need to be in Canberra's ear, yes. But I think also, essentially, RACGP has tried to solve this over and over and over again. Yes, we've gained more visibility. Yes, we've been in Canberra a lot more, but we still haven't unpacked this. And I sincerely believe that our issue is that government doesn't understand that we do far more per visit than any other player within the health sector. So when they see that item number for the MBS item number spend that GPs are, that they attribute to GP cost, they don't see that as an investment in health. They should see our contribution as an investment into the health system. And we are the most cost-effective aspect of the entire health system.
We're all going to move on now to our next question, question 2, which actually focuses on, well, something that's been an issue, I know, for GPs for the entire system throughout Australia for a very long time. And that's what you think can be done about the rural workforce shortage of GPs throughout Australia. This seems to be a challenge as old as the GP college itself. And what would you do as president to try and influence the outcomes there? We'll proceed in order again. So Dr. Karen Price, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Virginia, and thanks for the introduction. And don't we all know this old hairy chestnut of a problem? So this has been going on for decades. It's been going on for almost a century, and it's an international problem. So one of the big issues is that this is not just a medical problem. This is an infrastructure problem. This is about investment into rural and regional and remote communities. Australia is a very metrocentric environment, and that needs to change. So, I mean, I've seen Fiona Simpson, the National Farmers Federation person, talk about this, and she's very eloquent about it. We know there's going to be a pipeline issue, which we're going to talk about, I think, in our next question, where 90% of graduates turning into specialties. We need to give the people who come into general practice, we need to give them a positive experience in our rural communities. They have a great scope of practice. It's known that rural students do better, but more than that, we need to involve them in the community in which they're embedded in. So medical students, young doctors and doctors coming to live need to have a community experience. So in my community hubs and networks, there's going to be a whole range of activities, including a rural concierge who can show the doctors' families where the schools are, where the local communities are, where the sporting fields are. This has to be fun. So John Hall and I were talking about a youth muster, which I reckon is a great idea for some of the young people, which sounds like a lot of fun. I don't think I might go myself. And career paths that are meaningful. So we need to invest in rural grants so that people, whether on the National Rural Generalist or FRACGP, can access funding for the bolt-on bits that they need for the fit for context. And most importantly, I want to be able to bring ACRM and RACGP closer together and commit to having that conversation with ACRM. Michael Clements and I were talking about developing an in-common CPD home for rural doctors so that we can streamline and fit our resources together. So there's all sorts of a range of things to make this a really exciting career move, but investing in more than just clinical practice, investing in the community is really important. Thank you.
Karen Price, thanks so much. Christopher Irwin, we'll turn to you next.
Thanks so much. And I want to start by saying I actually agree with much of what Karen is saying, and it's quite a few good ideas, especially the hub idea. I think is really good, Karen. No other profession in Australia is essentially conscripted to work in rural areas. Every other industry realises to get an expert in the bush, you have to pay them better, and you have to incentivise the social and cultural qualities of life in rural Australia, which is bloody awesome. And we have to increase those social contacts in a way like Karen is describing. Doctors can't be forced into working rurally, and this is why it doesn't work. They have to be attracted to it. A truck driver in the mines could make $150,000 to $200,000. The GP taking care of them might be earning less. This has to change. I'm a firm believer that we need a strong and effective and professional lobby group. The woefully underfunded fee-for-service model completely breaks down in rural areas, where you have patients even more so lacking the ability to pay for excellent healthcare than in metro areas. My plan would be to lobby for consultation rebates across the board to rise by 25%, which would be the amount that we lost from the Medicare freeze and that decade of lost funding, and to increase those rebates even further based on the modified Monash model. Greater rebates flowing to areas that are more rural. We could do something similar with a bulk billing incentive to markedly increase patient rebates based on those same modifiers. This could then be assessed by the government in a similar way to how they used to assess districts of workforce shortage, and the incentives could rise or fall to ensure adequate doctor-patient ratios are maintained in the bush.
Okay. Chris, thanks so much. Let's turn now to Dr. Charlotte Hespe now.
Thanks, Virginia. Look, I agree with what's gone before in the conversations. Thanks, Karen and Chris. From where I'm sitting at the moment, I think I'll just raise that the issue that the rural workforce sustainability boils down to actually having a workforce that's sustainable, which is actually across the entire breadth of our general practice profession. And if we actually think we're going to solve the rural workforce before we actually even try and contemplate how we're going to deal with solving GP workforce, then we're not going to come up with a solution. And can I also say that I don't think I am going to solve this problem. Like Karen said, it's a 100-year-old problem. So I think, thinking that whoever is the RACGP president is going to come up with a solution that's going to work is a little bit laughable. However, there are those core issues that I think we need to address. To actually get more GPs who want to come into the rural workforce, we actually need a sales pitch. That sales pitch is about the remuneration, and that remuneration actually needs to be completely adequate for everything to do with that GP going into training there. As Karen said, it's got to be about the social network. I mean, one of the things that I've seen work really well is when a little town actually says, we need a GP, and they go out and market for themselves and find that GP. That's a great model. But going back to that remuneration thing, we need a training package. They need to be able to think that the remuneration long-term is going to be great. That may well be a completely different remuneration package from what we're actually offering for GPs in the city. A bit like the rural generalist models, and certainly has been quite successful in Queensland looking at that. But bottom line is we need to address the culture, but we also need to be innovative. We need to look at what different models of care look like. We can use telehealth as a bit of it, fly in, fly out, using mentoring, buddying practices, all those things. Let's think outside the box and help them solve the problem.
Thanks, Charlotte. Ayman Shenouda, thank you.
Look, I've been involved in that as a rural chair for a while, and I think there is a lot of elements that are there now that we need to address. The first thing that I want to mention is forcing doctors to go out rurally is a very naive way of thinking, and it's never going to be successful. So there is strategy in place, and I think there's 6 points in this strategy that I want to talk about. First of all, nurturing the doctors with a rural intent and support them and give them a clear career pathway in rural medicine is very important. The other thing that's very important that no one mentioned is delivering of the training in a rural and regional environment. That means that the doctors, when they're young, they can establish those community connections, but also during their training, they create a social networks around those communities so they can stay further in the community. The other thing is about the education experience itself. It needs to be robust, it needs to be flexible and supportive, and it needs to address the scope and the complexity of what we do. People, when they go out rural and address a holistic approach to patients and also contribute to emergency, contribute to delivering babies, it's a very exciting career. The doctors get into the right supportive and a robust training environment, they will flourish and love it. The fourth one is about recognition of doctors and what they do, and celebrating what doctors do, and because part of the enjoyment of what you do is that you're adding value to your community, you're making a difference to the community, and that's very obvious. So celebrating the profession. The one that everyone talked about is remuneration, and we need to remunerate for the skill that the doctor delivers. So it doesn't have to be a cardiologist to read an ECG. A GP can have the skill to read an ECG.
We'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Ayman.
Okay.
Dr. John Buckley, you're next.
Thanks again, Virginia. There's two arms to my answer. I've lived this for the last 25 years as an educator and in GP training, and I experienced it as a rural doctor for the 10 years before that. Think about the things that work, and the two things that we need are early positive experiences and rewards. The early positive experiences that we know work is approaching and enthusing high school students. I was a cynic with the rural medical schools when they came in, and they've been fantastic, and they have produced results, and they're really important. Long-term placements of students in rural communities is effective and does work. Long-term placements of junior doctors supportively, example, the PGPPP program in rural practices, does work. Scholarships like the John Flynn Scholarship, getting people repeatedly going to rural areas, this works. So these are the things we already know. As president, you need to drive back and say, where are these? How can we improve and incentivise? And how can we spread them across rural Australia to more students and more junior doctors? The second arm of what matters is rewards. The rural generalist title, when it becomes a protected title, will be a fantastic boon for rural doctors. And I appreciate all the work the college is already doing on this, including the rural faculty, Ayman. This is an extraordinary achievement. And when that comes through, it's going to revolutionise how rural doctors can think of themselves. I do want to mention, we can't afford to disenfranchise the great rural doctors who will not be rural generalists under that title. They're very important. We have to make that work together. The current rural workforce incentive money is very low at the beginning and builds. That's terrific for retention. It's not great for recruitment. And I really want to get people to revise and get that incentive money higher earlier. I do have ideas and plans about reforming Medicare to support the patients of the bush. Thanks, Virginia.
Okay, thanks for that, John. And Magdalena Simonis, thank you.
Yeah, so I think that this is an infrastructure problem to begin with. It's a huge issue that government hasn't been addressing appropriately. And in order to attract doctors, you need to have better infrastructure. And in order to support the communities, you need to have better roads and better systems in place. So that's the first thing, and that's what RACGP can't fix. But what we can address is actually the marketing and promotion of this as a specialty. And as John mentioned, the rural generalist specialty now has been launched, and it's a great subspecialty, and it's a great boon for ACRM and for RACGP, and we should celebrate that and promote it. We need to start with marketing promotion early, and I think that medical students and hospital doctors should be exposed more to the opportunities. And there's this perception also that there's a lot of exposure to it's a high stress, high turnover environment where registrars are often on their own because GP supervisors have to tend to the patients themselves, and that they feel rather unsupported. And there has been a history of burnout in the registrar. So we do need to create systems in place that are supportive for the GP supervisors and also the GP trainees, so that they're not felt that they're not in a position where they feel exposed and under-supported. But demystifying it, making it attractive, because it is an exciting opportunity for those that have that desire for something different, and creating scholarships, I think, is going to go a long way to promoting this. Now, with respect to attracting doctors to going to the bush and to remote and rural areas, I think we need to talk about a business establishment package with tax incentives over an extended period of time. This should incentivise doctors that want to go out and start becoming a part of a community. But this would be a positive thing for them over a period of time. And
We'll have to leave it there because we're out of time. We're going to stick strictly to the 2 minutes if we can.
2 minutes.
We'll leave some discussion about what you've all proposed there about, yes, as you've all noted, a thorny and intractable problem there. We'll leave that perhaps to the end, just to try and keep to time. And let's move on to our third and final question, which is what you each believe the college president's role should be in addressing the key issues affecting GPs in training, including training remuneration, exam fees, etc. And a couple of you have touched on the fact of, trying to get GPs through the system and the dwindling supply line that you may have there. So we'll take that in turn, and we'll start with you again, Dr. Karen Price.
Thanks, Virginia, and welcome to all the GP registrars watching and over this question. I just want to say that I've got your back. I've moderated on GPDU for many years now, and a lot of Dr. Anonymous posts relate to these kind of issues. And in the 2000s, the GPs who were becoming the doctors who were becoming registrars could leave hospital and actually get an increase in income. So this part of this issue is the whole sector defunding, and you've already seen, are going to address that. So in terms of your entering into this space, I think we need to look at the entitlements, which are currently under negotiation between GPRA and GPSA, and look at the various models to make sure there's no disadvantage on either side. And I think I've got the skills to be able to disentangle some of those more difficult conversations. I think one of the things I will say to you is you want to retain professional autonomy. So portable entitlements are a really attractive offer, and perhaps even the New Zealand model where you get an employee wage for the first bit. But I believe that this generation has been a bit disinherited, and I think that's an absolute shame. And I think it speaks to something that we really need to pay attention to, because you are our future, and I want to make sure that you're in a thriving future. The other thing with the exams, I think we need to look at the cost of that and need to look at, Ayman Shenouda mentioned earlier, that might be a prepay kind of idea, or perhaps a delayed fee result for what I've talked about. But I think there's a lot more to this. And this is that up until now, your life has really been one of transactional culture, and that really bothers me. I think the college can provide you with a beautiful professional culture, a vocational culture, a career path, and an welcoming into fellowship, which is what the professional college should be doing for you. And this is including giving you a voice. So the new GPs in training faculty, where you can speak to the board, and I will make sure that GPRA is coming on the National Council of Primary Care Doctors. That's a really important part, that you have a voice in what goes on, and that you can negotiate, and that we can help you into this marvellous and wonderful profession. But in terms of maintaining the costs, we've got to increase the remuneration, we've got to support you in the exam fees, and I think the communication there was not very good, and that's one of my strengths, as you know.
All right, Karen, we'll have to leave it there, sorry, just because you're over 2 minutes. We didn't start the clock absolutely accurately, so sorry to jump in there. But we will now. Now to you, Dr. Christopher Irwin, thanks.
Virginia. So I agree this is a crisis. We can't even fill our training posts. I'm a GP supervisor, and I'm constantly listening to the many issues that affect registrars every day. I feel the main issues that affect GP registrars are the same issues that affect GP fellows: low remuneration, high professional costs, and a lack of respect from government and other subspecialists. I think we need to fix these. And I think the most important part of this is creating a professional and effective GP lobby and union group. I want to decrease costs by decreasing the membership fees of the RACGP by 10% and ensuring that the RACGP is not profiting from the examinations of registrars. I want to use our professional lobbying to get back that lost 25% of GP consultation items from the decade of Medicare freeze, with the RACGP having been in the tent. I want to bring back the PGPPP and want to work with medical schools to see general practice as the core of medicine and not some throwaway 3-month rotation. Specifically with GP registrars, I'd look to try to implement federally funded parental leave and study leave through effective lobbying, and potentially looking at changing GPT-1 into a single federally funded role with pay at least as good as an equivalent hospital registrar, so that new registrars can acclimatise to the massive change in role and focus on learning fantastic patient-centred care from dedicated supervisors instead of worrying about finances and the MBS before moving on to a percentage-based model like we currently have. And I wouldn't want the practices to be affected by any negatively financially either.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. Charlotte Hespe.
Thanks, Virginia. At risk of sounding like a broken record, this issue is yet again about sustainability. And until we actually address what that actually means, why are we not a sustainable specialty going forwards, we're not going to solve this wicked problem. So issue number one is culture. At the moment, we don't even respect ourselves. I hear so many people being apologetic about being a GP. Let's celebrate it. I'm hearing 6 passionate GPs here talking about why they want to be the president. They're passionate about it. Our role is central and key as a president. We need to go and sell the wondrous career pathway that is ahead of anyone who chooses general practice. That story first for us, but we also have to do it to the other specialties, and we need to get them early, a bit like John was talking about school students. That wonderful media campaign that Ayman's been talking about, that's a wonderful campaign about selling the wonderful lifelong journey of being a GP. So we need to attract them. But who would come to it in the current remuneration package? Not only, as Karen's talked about, is that you drop your income when you go out, but also that's not much looking, great in terms of going forwards. They come out with huge debt. So we've really got to address that. We've got to look at the salary packages that support them. There's got to be flexibility, portability. There's got to be leave options. That's going to be complex, but we've already started those conversations with Greg Hunt, and he understands why we really need to do it. And then in terms of exam fees, yep, we actually as a college need to listen and understand the stresses that GPs in training are going under, and we need to actually make sure that we support them, understand them, and make sure everything is transparent. Communication is key. And as president, that's what I really want us to do, set up better communication with our registrars.
Okay, thanks so much, Charlotte. Ayman Shenouda, thank you.
Look, I talked before about the profession itself and how to make it attractive, and I talked about the robust training before and attracting doctors younger in their career and give them a career in general practice that's wonderful and of value to them and to their communities. What I'm going to talk about is there is clearly a financial problem within the training between registrars dropping their income when they come from the hospital down to general practice. There's also clearly a financial problem for supervisors that need to deliver an adequate training, but they don't have the finance or the time to do it. There is an appetite within the government at the moment, and we discussed this, as Charlotte said, with Greg Hunt a few times, and there's an appetite to address this issue. So what we need to do is to have a united position from the profession, from the Supervisor Association, from the Registrar Association, from the AMA, and from RACGP. Go to the minister with one document to address this issue and tell them that's the only way it's going to go forward. There is money within the system that we can save on, but also there might be some dipping for extra money from the government. But if the government understands what's the value of this, we are the only specialty in all specialties that are funded for education. That means that the government want this profession to be strong, especially in terms of delivering good GPs. So they would invest in delivering better GPs for the future. They might not invest in an MBS item number because they cannot control it, but things that's going to add value to the profession, they might invest in. But a united front with all organization and addressing the issue, and there is an appetite for it, it's going to work. And I think we are getting there.
Amen. Thanks so much. John Buckley.
Thanks, Virginia. This is a home ground question for me. I guess this has been my last 25 years. I'll start by saying what registrars tell me about their placements. Before they go, they want to know all about how much will I be paid and where is it, particularly how close to home. After the term, they don't talk about that. They talk about, was I treated as a colleague? Did I get supported? Did I have a good learning experience? Have I grown as a GP? How do I feel about myself? Training practices are critical. We have an amazing opportunity now for training during this presidential term to come back to the RACGP. And your question, Virginia, is about the role of the president. The role of the president is to oversee that transition, make it smooth, make it positive, and bring to it what is needed for our training program. Now, there are certain issues I'll address in a moment, but the overall thing is to raise the morale of general practice by leadership and role modeling. Let's share the love of general practice. Let's help that to get recruitment. If GPs are unhappy, who would come? If GPs are happy and share that message with junior doctors and students, that alone is the beginning of new recruitment. Yes, registrars face challenges in training, and I acknowledge that all the time. One of the big ones is this drop in income at the start of a term. Supervisors can't pay them more, I can tell you that. So we need to find a way as it transitions to boost the subsidy. We pay practices for registrar salaries for that first 6 months. Nearly all registrars develop a really good income and patient base as time progresses in training. That first 6 months is a really difficult time, and we need to get control of the money and adjust it in a way that supports that transition. And we have to support and provide great training practices so they can do the job that the registrars really need. The rest will take care of itself.
Thanks, John. And finally, Magdalena Simonis.
Well, look, I feel like I'm going to reiterate what everybody else has said, because the issue here is, one, image of what general practice is. So we need to improve on that, and we need to be celebrating what general practice is. We love it. We need to demonstrate that. We need to teach that to medical students all the way through. So, and in hospital systems too, they've got a perception that if you earn less, you're valued less. And a lot of HMOs see their colleagues move into general practice, and they wonder, why are you doing this when you could be earning what we're earning? So that first dip in income has to be addressed, and that's a federal issue, and government needs to supplement that drop to bring their income, the GPT1 income, up to where it is for the HMOs. When GP registrars come into a relationship with a practice, they have to negotiate a contract for the very first time in their lives. And the diet of power rests with the GP supervisor, who's actually their employer and also is going to train them and evaluate them. So I think the RACGP will play a really important role in navigating those difficult conversations between them. And sometimes it can be from the outset, but sometimes it can also be throughout their training. So RACGP, I see us as being in a position where we can provide that buffer and that dialogue for them and that safe space, and provide a culture for them that encourages them to grow and feel that we're on their side and supporting them. Now, leave entitlements, they're really awful in GP training, and we hear it time and time again. There's no maternity or paternity leave, and that's a federal issue, and it needs to be provided. And there's also work-life balance, so they can't take holidays when they need them. They have to take them when they're basically within their term, and if they don't, they lose that opportunity. The quality of training varies from RTO and from GP practice, so we need to have that as uniform, high quality across the way. And we need to provide some supervisor support also, so that they also have the adequate funding and training. So, yeah.
All right,
so I think,
thanks.
Yeah.
We'll have to leave it there, Magdalena. Thank you. But we've got some time now to more generally speak, and to perhaps pick up a few of the threads that have been left by the conversation, and we can keep talking till about 8:05. But I just wanted to step back, because, of course, the role that each of you is seeking is to be president of the college. And I wanted to ask you, given that so much of our discussion has always naturally and logically looped back to the federal government, to issues of funding, and to the relationship with the health minister, whoever that might be, and whichever party that might come from. Can I just go to you each, but briefly, and talk to me about how you see that relationship and how you might manage that relationship as the figurehead of the college? John, I might start with you.
Thanks. I'd like to take some time to understand the health minister's job, because it's a big and difficult job, and then I'd love him or her to take the time to understand my job. Every general practice consultation has a prequel and a sequel and a whole other subplots, like a really good movie. This is where the value comes, and for people to truly understand that what I do today is affected by what I did last time and affects what happens next time. What I do today impacts on the patient's health in 3 or 4 or 5 ways that you can't get by measuring a service another way. So it's a relationship of mutual understanding that I seek. And then once allied with the health minister, to work, who are the key allies we need to work together to solve the problem? The minister alone, like the president alone, can't change everything. But we need to understand who to work with and how to work with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Magdalena, I'm going to come to you next on that as well.
Yeah, I actually really like what you said, John, and I agree entirely, because I think it's all about relationships. I think that the health minister has an enormous job, and there's this push and pull and tug of war. Like, everyone is asking for money. They understand that health spend is a really important thing. It's currently at 10% of the GDP, and they know that it's going to climb. So we need to explain clearly what the impact of what we're requesting is going to be down that pipeline, and how it's going to benefit the health system in the long run. So partnering with government, I think, is our answer to the negotiation and tug of war of advocacy for more funding for training, teaching, and remuneration through the NBS. That's the approach I would take, and I think partnering in and outlining how we are partners in delivering the health outcomes for the nation is really what it's all about.
Charlotte, at the beginning of our conversation, you were talking about making the minister love us, you said, because we are able to save him money. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yes, sort of having done some work with Greg Hunt, there's no doubt it's about the story that gives him wins. And general practice can really give him wins, particularly at the moment where finance is really screwing down on any sort of unnecessary spending, which is where we're going to really have to fight hard for telehealth to stay there, because finance just sees that as a bottomless pit of money, whereas Greg Hunt does understand that it actually is necessary. So having the relationship with Greg Hunt is helping him be able to spin those stories. Greg Hunt is a man who loves a good story, a patient story. And you know what? As GPs, that's our lives. We have great stories, and we need to bring it back to that so that he gets it. And if he gets it, he can sell it to finance. And if he can sell it to finance, then it's going to be a win for the patient, but also for general practice along the way. And that's why he needs to love us, because we need to take him with us on that patient journey, that patient story. And I agree with John and Magdalena. It's about him understanding that, but really it needs to actually have an identity. And that's much better than just sort of singing out the stats.
Okay, Ayman? So you're on mute, Ayman. If you can just unmute yourself, thanks.
Sorry. So I think there's a position, we have to take a position that the college have for the future of primary care. And we have got this statement. As part of our advocacy, we worked on a document called the Vision of Sustainable Primary Care. It's a very important document that the college have delivered. And it shows how much savings we can do. The next step is we are now working on how much cost it will be involved in delivering this. This is a solution for the future. I think we have to have the same message with minister, whether it's opposition or government in charge. We just have to have a point that we stand on. And this point is backed up by research, backed up by understanding the environment we're living in, understanding and addressing the issues for the future. Ministers want solutions. They definitely want solutions. And you have to go there with a win-win situation. So, and I just have to say that the 10-year plan by the minister fits very well with our vision. And actually, it's just amazing when you start looking on the discussions that we have at the peak bodies of general practice to advise the minister about how primary health would work and how that fits in with what the college wants to do. So we want to emphasize on this point and emphasize on what our vision is for the future and how can we make it work and happen for whoever the minister is.
I mean, thank you. Karen Price?
Thanks, Virginia. Look, this is a really, really important question. And I think we need to reflect on the fact that relationships are really hard and they start with empathy. I mean, this is part of my PhD research, which is nearly finished, about making and keeping good relationships. So looking at Greg Hunt, I mean, one of the advantages I might have is that we grew up in the same electorate. So Mornington Peninsula is home for me for a long time. But that's just having something in common. And I think when I look at Minister Hunt, what I can see is that he's someone who's very passionate about the Australian community and doing a good job. And I think we start from there and build on that and understanding what we both need from each other, defining the boundaries, defining the areas where it's going to be difficult and maintaining, even in that difficulty, dignity and respect, which is the way that I often approach detoxifying some of the rather brutal conversations at times on GPDU. I'm very skilled at that, and I'm going to bring that into the government environment. Of course, describing all the things we've described tonight and whatever gnarly problem we've got, and understanding that the minister has a very difficult job. I think dignity and respect and maintaining an open curiosity, building on what Harry has already done and previous presidents, of course, and building on the good reputation and growing reputation of the RACGP. But we do need to have firm boundaries, and I don't think I'm naive about how carefully and skilled we need to be in these navigations, because, as I said, they've got a hard job. They're protecting the nation's resources, and we need to respect that. Thank you.
Okay. Chris, thanks.
Thanks, Virginia. So I think it's a really important question. I've got quite a lot of experience with politicians. In another life, I was selected for political training by a major political party to run for pre-selection. Decided that advocacy and passion for general practice is more important.
As a side question, which party?
Well, I'd prefer not to say, Virginia, but one of the major parties.
those voting for you might like to know.
I'll talk later about it. But life, business, and politics is all about relationships. I communicate frequently with both my state and federal members of parliament. And in fact, like I've just spoken with Danielle Green the other day, who's the state member for Yan Yan, and Kate Thwaites for Jagga Jagga. And they're both fantastic representatives to their community. And I communicate them with quite a lot. One of my passions is how we can better help refugees within our community. Now, with politicians, we have to understand what they want, and we have to make life easier for them. Politicians aren't evil. They're regular people who are primarily focused on trying to do good for the people they represent, trying to do good for their country, and staying in a job. We need to make it easy for them, and we need to make it easier for them to choose what benefits our patients and general practice, easier for them over what favours the pharmacy guild or the pathology guild. And a key part of this is building relationships, but also having effective political lobbying and effective professional lobbyists, because the relations with governments and ministers need to exist far longer than the 1.5 years that the next president will have.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Very quickly, in fairness, we do have to get to everyone, so I really need you to be short so I can then get to my final question. But we didn't get to any discussion following our talk about the rural challenge. Now, my question is, and I think it may have been you, Charlotte, who said that, you know, we're not going to solve this problem. We're kidding ourselves to think the next president's going to solve the problem of, you know, of rural GPs or GPs in rural practice. But what's, in your view, and again, briefly, just a quickly and easily achievable wedge, at least, something that you can wedge into this issue to open it up and to try and start the solution finding and to eventually solve the problem of a lack of GPs in rural settings? John, I think you alluded already to it, you know, to training programs and placement programs that were working well, so that may suffice as your answer. But what is something that could be achieved in the next term of the president of the college? We'll start with you, Charlotte.
Thanks, Virginia. I think we'll go to that solutions-based thing that we've talked about, in terms of you go to the politicians and you talk about some solutions. And I think that's where we need to be innovative. We can actually platform diving board off the telehealth option and look at some sort of approaches that may be, as I said, thinking outside the box, along with what we've talked about in terms of the need for it to be remuneration, and it needs to be community owned. So if you could actually do some of those together, you might actually be able to solve some spots, and then those spots can grow into a blot.
All right, John Buckley.
Better incentives at the beginning of your time in a rural career, not low at the beginning and build. And if we can really have a proper look at the possibility of Medicare variation to support rural patients better.
Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Virginia. One thing I just want to talk about quickly is we keep talking.
I pretty much just need a short answer to this one, I think.
So better funding, better rebates for rural patients. We need professional, effective advocacy for our patients and the GPs who care for them.
Karen Price?
We need to work out what South East Queensland did, because they've filled all their rural places. And I think that's about having a regionalised community network. We need to bring, and what I will promise to do is bring the RACGP into the rural communities so that you've got a network and a hub and support, as well as the financial incentives, of course.
Ayman, just a short response here.
I just, we worked so hard in the last 2 years with a National Rural Health Commissioner that produced a document that's very, very doable, and it's actually addressed what's on the ground and how can we utilize what's on the ground to the best of rural communities and the best of attracting doctors to rural communities.
All right, well, I might suggest that document gets attached to the website here for the college, and perhaps people can look at that further. Magdalena?
There are two things I would recommend. One of them is the tax incentives for doctors who decide to actually work there over a 10-year period, and with an establishment package to establish a practice in a rural setting. The other is actually to train GPs who are interested in doing a course through RACGP in ACRM, GPs later in their professional career who want to actually form a pool of GPs who are ready to mobilise and actually do a rural change for a period of time. There are lots of us in our 50s and so forth who would rather than retire do something different for the rest of their 5 or 10 years. And that might be a really attractive option, which we've got now with the opportunity with ACRM and RACGP taking over training.
Okay. And just finally, and I'm going to go through all of you, but in the order that you are in the ballot, my final question to you is why you want to do this, why you want to win the presidency of the college. Karen Price.
I have been an advocate for general practice for pretty much all of my life. I've lived pretty much all of the experiences, and I know I can do the job. I've done it on GPs Down Under, where I've brought people together. It's one of my skill sets. I believe in the people-powered presidency, and I'm pretty confident I can do that within the college. And I'd love to see the cultural change. I'd love to see the flourishing of our profession.
Christopher Irwin.
Thanks, Virginia. With the CPD changes in which members no longer have to be members of the RACGP, I think our profession is at a crisis point. And I think unless there is great positive change in the RACGP, we will have a membership crisis, which is bad for the college, but horrific for general practice. We will lose our last effective chance of advocacy in which our patients will suffer, GPs will suffer, and Australia will suffer. So I'm running because I think there's a crisis and I think we need to change.
Charlotte Hespe.
Thanks, Virginia. I'm running because similarly, I'm passionate about general practice. I think it is the best career. I think it does the most that we possibly could ask for in terms of improving patient health outcomes. And I'm quite an unusual beast in that I'm a GP, I'm a practice owner, I'm a GP supervisor, I'm a medical educator, I'm an academic. But more importantly, I've actually been involved in leadership on the ground in my space and really making a difference for GPs. And I'm particularly experienced as being a board director and a chair of multiple GP-based organisations. So I actually know governance, I live and breathe it. But I also believe I bring very good, respectful, open, transparent leadership skills to the table. And I think that's really useful going forward. And now is the time. It's just, we really do have an opportunity to finally get that funding and make general practice sustainable.
And Dr. Ayman Shenouda, why do you want to do this?
Look, it's time. It's the right time for me. I've been involved with the leadership position within the college for the last 15 years. I've seen and delivered on behalf of the college. I've got the connection with politicians, with bureaucrats, and with communities, and with other GPs. I traveled all around the country. Everywhere I was there, I'm listening to grassroots GP. I know what the problem is. I know what the environment is. It's time for me to deliver more and to deliver continuity of what we've been doing. Advocacy, as I said, it's a big story, and this is the time to deliver. And understanding also the college from within, and especially in the time of change where we have a new CEO, it's going to be very helpful that I've known every part of the college and I've been involved in every committee in the college for the last 15 years. So I can be a very good help to the new CEO too.
Thanks, Ayman. Dr. John Buckley.
I looked ahead at the next 2 years for our college, and I saw taking back training, CPD changes, the launch of the Rural Generalist Fellowship, which is so exciting. And I saw the other changes happening, and I looked back on my last 25 years and I said, hey, that's me. And so this is the one time in my entire career that everything that's happening aligns with my experience, my life, and what a joy it will be to oversee some of that.
And Dr. Magdalena Simonis.
Well, I've been a GP, passionate GP for many years, but I've also been involved in the RACGP in various leadership roles. So I understand the organisation, know where it hurts too. And I've been really effective outside of the RACGP, building relationships and developing programs and health initiatives. And I feel that now's the time where I want to channel my energy into RACGP entirely, because I think that we're at a crossroads. I actually think that we're at a precipice where primary care is actually going to be fragmented, and that worried me tremendously. So I want to step up and step in so that government can understand that we're partners in delivering their long-term national health plan. I see that chronic disease is a long-standing issue, and we are the key to unlock that potential for a healthier Australia. I really, truly believe that we can do this, and that's why I stepped up for this.
Well, candidates, thank you. And on that note, it's time to end our discussion in tonight's presidential Q&A. The questions that were asked this evening came directly from the membership, and we received more than 70 questions, and they were based on major themes. They all sort of clustered together, as you can hear and tell. All the candidates will have the opportunity to respond to questions not asked during this forum, with the answers published on the college website shortly. So I hope you've enjoyed your opportunity to see your candidates standing for the presidency in action before you vote. Please, a round of applause at home for all of our candidates here who are sitting here with you at the moment. Dr. Karen Price, Dr. Christopher Irwin, Dr. Charlotte Hespe, Dr. Ayman Shenouda, Dr. John Buckley, and Dr. Magdalena Simonis. And my thanks as well to you all for being here. Don't forget, voting opens on Thursday, the 20th of August, closes on Monday, the 31st. Tonight's Q&A demonstrated there are potentially big challenges ahead for you all and the health system more broadly. So this is your opportunity to ensure that your voice is heard in the kind of president that you want to have leading your organisation. For more information or voting, or to find out more about your candidates, you can visit the college elections page via the link which is displayed on your screen now. Apparently, I'm sure it is. Thanks to all the candidates for being here and for everyone's time tuning in this evening. And I wish you all the best with the elections. And I hope to be speaking to one or some of you on the radio at some time soon. So thanks so much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Virginia.
Good night.
Thank you.